Okay, it is 6 o'clock. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Welcome to the After Hours Live with Chuck Bowser, RCDD, where you get to submit your questions and they get answered by your favorite, well, that would be me, RCDD. That doesn't mean, though, that I can answer every single question because, there's a lot of stuff in our industry. If I don't know the answer, I will get you the answer. I will get you the answer. Yeah, you did pick the right one this week. I don't know what it is with StreamYard. Last week, LinkedIn didn't work. And this time, YouTube didn't work. So, frustrating. Let's see, you get to see the backsides of being a content creator. So, anyways, we always start off this session with, what are you drinking? In the chat box, tell us what you are drinking. Let me guess, Shotzi, you're drinking a 2-liter of Dr. Pepper. How close am I? Let me know. I happen to know Shotzi pretty well. He's actually in the TDMM study group, and he's also a Patreon, so he gets an additional time with me that only the Patreon members get. This, by the way, that's where you can support the channel. Go to Patreon. There's 4 different levels that you can pick from. There's also a place to do a one-time donation on PayPal that just goes towards paying the fees for MailChimp and Zoom and StreamYard and all that other fun stuff because it all costs money. So George says he is drinking water. Good job, George. Good job. So I nailed it, didn't I? Actually, I don't think it's Dr. Pepper. I think isn't it Diet Dr. Pepper? Because it's got a white label, I think, if I remember right. Anyways, moving on with the show. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. I'm really having a good week this week because, like I mentioned, for those who may not have heard before, the YouTube channel hit 100 subscribers. Yay! 100 subscribers. Just shows progress. There's a thing that you can do on LinkedIn to see how your profile is doing. And it says that my LinkedIn profile is ranked among the top 1% in my industry. Now, the reason I say that is not because I want, hey, look at me. It's because my message of educate, encourage, and enrich is resonating and it's getting out there to people. That's what this is all about. This is about making your life better, increasing your knowledge. Maybe you get a raise. Try to transfer some of this knowledge out of this old crusty head of mine into your head. That's what we're here for. So again, questions, put them in the chat box. Bill's drinking Gatorade. Hit the ski hill. Wow. Where do you live, Bill? You live somewhere where it's snowing? I live in Central Florida, so the only skiing we're doing is water skiing. So again, remember, put your questions in the chat box. And since there's a 30-second delay, I'm going to go ahead and answer one of the ones that was submitted ahead of time. Again, these are not reading glasses. These are safety glasses. I want to make sure that the words don't pop off the page and hit me in the eye. Okay? So the first one was from John Pepper from Boise, Idaho. And he emailed me. And he said, Chuck, can I put OFNR in a plenum ceiling if it's in innerduct? Can I put OFNR in a ceiling if it's in innerduct? If you think you know the answer, put it in the chat. No, wait. Put it in the chat box. There you go. If you think you know the answer to that one, put it in the chat box. So for those who may not know what OFNR means, let's start there first. OFNR, optical fiber non-conductive riser-rated cable. Riser-rated cable needs to be put in a riser-rated area. You cannot put it in a plenum-rated area. So he didn't really give me enough information to really answer correctly for his situation. So I'm just going to make some assumptions. By the way, if you do send me a question, the best way to do it, send me the question, and like in an email or whatever, and then write a short little paragraph. When I say paragraph, 2, 3, 4 sentences, whatever it takes, it could be as little as 2, to be the backstory. So that way I kind of know where I'm going with that. So I'm assuming that because there's innerduct in the ceiling, that's most likely a plenum-rated ceiling, and that's probably plenum-rated innerduct. If that is the case, you cannot put OFNR inside of that innerduct. And the reason you can't, other than it being a code violation, is if that innerduct gets exposed to heat or flame, it's going to melt. Then it's going to melt the cable jacket that's riser-rated, which produces more toxic off gases and smoke, which causes people not to be able to get out of a building fast enough. Now, if it's a riser-rated ceiling, and it's a riser-rated innerduct, yes, you can certainly put riser-rated fiber inside that environment. So I didn't have enough information there to really kind of go. And it's still looking. Nobody has submitted any questions yet. So we'll go to question number 2. Question number 2. Yeah, put on my safety glasses so I don't get injured while reading these questions. This is from Fred R. in Orlando, Florida. Fred is not that far from me. Orlando is, well, depending on where he's in Orlando, he's about an hour or so that way. Yeah. If he's on the east side of Orlando, he's an hour and a half because Orlando is a really big metro city. There you go. Big city. So he shot me a text message. He's one of those people who has my cell phone number. And he says, what is the correct way to attach a fiber to a pull string? So I've always been taught one way, but for this one, I wanted to make sure that I was completely accurate. So I conferred to my Bixie Pocket Field Guide for fiber. Okay. Boom. One of these. You can get, this is a set. There's a fiber, a cobber, and then a general. So I went here to confer, just make sure that I was indeed correct. And sure enough, I was. But they also had it another way in there as well. Now, when I used to pull fiber, I used to use this thing called a Kellum's grip. A Kellum's grip is just a wire mesh. Let's say, for example, just happen to have a piece of cable here. Let's say this is my fiber optic cable. It's not, but let's say it is. So it's a wire mesh, and it's kind of like in a funnel shape. And then you put it inside that funnel. When you pull on the end of that Kellum's grip, that wire mesh kind of comes down and bites onto the cable, right? The industry used to call it something else, but that name wasn't sensitive to people, the Asian community. That's how I've always done it. But there is another method that you can do. You can strip off. Infocom's in Orlando again. Nice. I'm probably going to have to try to go over there again. The other method, probably the more common method, because a Kellum's grip costs money. What you're going to do is you're going to strip off 12 to 18 inches of the cable jacket. So you're basically left with the fiber strands being exposed and the Kevlar. Don't cut off the Kevlar, or some people call it aramid yarn. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that your pull string or pull rope, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to bring it back, tie it to a knot so you have a loop on the end of it. You're going to stick the aramid yarn through that loop, bring it back, tape that all up, tape it up to the cable, and then tape those ends to the string. And that's that's the preferred method according to the Bixie ICTM. Either works. The one's a little bit more expensive than the other. So, yeah, that's the best way to do fiber, because that way, when you're pulling on the fiber, when we pull regular copper, we like to use a knot called a half hitch. A half hitch basically means you take the pull string. Now, this is not pull string. It's just a piece of string I happen to have on my desk. And then you make a loop with it, and then you stick the cable through this loop, right? And then when you go to tighten this up, what it does is it actually bites into the cable. That's called a biting knot. So it'll look kind of like that. The harder you pull on this, the harder it bites on it. If you do that with fiber cable, you're going to damage the cable jacket. And damage the fiber. So that's why the preferred method is to strip back 12 inches, attach the pull string to the Kevlar, tape that all up. So that way when you're pulling the pull string, you're actually pulling the Kevlar, the strength member inside that fiber. You're not damaging the fiber at all. So that's the best way to actually do that. And you'll find that if you do it that way, you won't break any strands. Your testing will go a lot smoother in the long run. Okay. Checking the chat box. I don't see any questions yet. So we'll go to the next previously submitted question. This one is from John H. in Pomona, California. And he says, or asks, carbon blocks always seem to fail. Should I use gas protectors? That surprises me, from California. Now, what he's actually talking about is building entrance protection. So the code book tells us that every cable that runs outside of a building is considered to be exposed to lightning, meaning that if lightning hits the ground near it, the voltage will get on the cable, come into the building, and it has to have what's called a lightning protection system. And if it doesn't, that voltage will continue on until it gets to a telephone or a computer or a person, which is not a good thing. So it says you have to put a building entrance protection. Now, there are 3 exceptions to that rule, and I'm not going to go into that tonight unless somebody really wants me to do it. So there are 3 types of common fuses that you can use for that building entrance protection. The cheapest one is called the carbon blocks. Now, the carbon blocks have been around for a long, long time. They're also the cheapest as well. So they have these 2 carbon elements inside of them, and there's an air gap between them. The air gap is actually a specific distance, and the distance is calculated based on how much it has far apart it has to be in order for it to arc when somewhere between 300 and 1,000 volts gets exposed to that fuse. Right, so when you get 300 plus, there's enough energy, it arcs, it goes to the next one. And if it can, not necessarily always, but it can be enough energy to short it to the ground and burn out the carbon block. If that happens, you're replacing that carbon block, which means you got to take it out and you go get another one. Good thing they're cheap. They also have a really slow triggering time. It takes over 15 nanoseconds in order for that carbon block to trigger. And that's a long time. That's a long time when you've got 1,000 volts hitting something, especially something that's got transistors in it, like computers, monitors, printers, stuff like that. And the reason I said that surprised me for his area, because California has the least amount of thunderstorm days a year out of the whole continental United States, right? So a thunderstorm day basically means a thunderstorm day is a 24-hour period in which you hear thunder. Now, for example, I happen to live in Central Florida. Central Florida is known as the lightning capital of the world. And where I live in Central Florida, we get anywhere between 90 and 100 thunderstorm days a year, meaning you hear thunder 90 to 100 times a year. In California, in some of the parts of California, so the West Coast, not all of the West Coast of California, but some of it, there are as few as 5 thunderstorm days a year. So in other words, they only hear thunder 5 days out of the entire year. That's why it kind of surprised me that he said that, but this question that they always seem to fail. That leads me to believe that there's something else going on. I'll get to that in a second. So once that carbon block has been triggered, you got to reset. Now, one of the methods is, if you have carbon blocks that are failing, that tells me there's maybe a piece of equipment that's got some voltage problems that might be causing that. So I would check that. But I would also make sure that you maybe just switch. Let me turn off this banner. The banner is kind of like distracting me. There's my ADD kicking in on me. I would maybe go to a different type of protector, right? And what I mean by that is there are 2 other protectors you can choose from. The next one up is going to be called a gas tube protector. Gas tube protector. So a gas tube protector, there's an inert gas inside of that tube, inside that fuse. And when it gets hit with that voltage surge, it ionizes the gas, and then that makes a connectivity inside of that fuse, and then it sends that voltage to the ground. Now, once that flag dissipates, then it resets itself. And yes, that is a Maryland flag behind me. I am from Maryland originally. I don't live in Maryland now, but I used to live in Maryland. I used to be in Prince George's County. Lived in a little town called Beltsville. So that's why I have the Maryland flag. And I still have my roots there. I'm still in my Old Bay seasoning. Still love crabs. Still love the Orioles. I am not a Tampa Bay Rays fan. Sorry. Hope I didn't offend anybody there. So the good thing about the gas tube protectors is they got a faster response time. So they're going to respond between 10 and 15 nanoseconds. So remember, the carbon blocks are over 15 seconds. Now, that doesn't mean it goes at 16. Sometimes it might be 20. The longer that piece of equipment gets exposed to a voltage surge, the more damage, the more potential for someone to get hurt, right? So with that gas tube protector, it triggers faster. And the best thing about it is it resets itself. Now, I did mention about the gas tube, about the carbon blocks. If I was doing a phone system install in Central Florida, where I live right now, and I had to put building entrance protection on on that cable because it comes in from the outside, because I live in Central Florida, the lightning capital of the world, I would not use carbon blocks. And the reason I wouldn't use carbon blocks is because every time a bolt of lightning hits the ground, that electricity travels through the ground, especially if the ground's wet. If you're getting lightning strikes, what other weather anomaly are you most likely getting? You're probably getting lightning strikes. So what happens if a bolt of lightning hits, let's say, my neighbor's yard, that's about 500 feet that way, hits his yard. The voltage can, if the ground's wet, come through the ground and get onto my cable and come into my house and cause a voltage surge. And if you got something that's really sensitive, like computers, fax machines, stuff like that, it'll shut it off and could actually burn it up. So if it's a carbon block, what happens, because we get so many lightning strikes, not necessarily direct strikes, every time that lightning hits the ground, you get a spike, right? And that spike will actually wear out a carbon block. And you'll know when they start to go bad because you'll start to, when you pick up the phone, you'll hear static on the line. Static's the number one indicator that that carbon block is about ready to go. So, yeah, that's pit beef sandwiches. Nice. Oh, you're making me hungry. You're making me hungry. That's right. After this live hour session, I'm taking my wife out on our Valentine's Day. We were supposed to do it last weekend, but things happened. We didn't do it. So we're going to the Mexican restaurant tonight as soon as I finish with this broadcast. Again, questions, put them in the chat box. Okay, I only have 2 more questions, and then I'm out of pre-submitted questions. So again, if you have any questions, code, standards, installation, project management, estimating, career advice, all that fun stuff. So I forgot. There's one more fuse. The solid state fuse. Now, the solid state fuse, typically, they're color red. So that way, when you're looking at a building entry protection, you can tell right away that that's a solid state protector, right? Somebody stuck soldering mic cables. Oh, when I first got in this industry, there was telephone cable installers and computer cable installers. I worked for a computer cabling company. I worked for Custom Computer Cable in Virginia. And we used to do twin X connectors, used to do Wang connectors, and they were solder-on connectors. And I burnt my fingers more than once. And funny thing, you have to scrape off the excess solder so it would slide into the things correctly. And the funny thing is, I would never cut myself with the X-Acto knife unless I put a new blade in it. You would think I'd cut myself with a dull blade. No, as soon as you put a new blade, I guarantee you within 5 minutes, whoosh, I'd cut myself off. So anyway, get back to the solid state protectors. So solid state protectors, they trigger at a very low voltage because they're trying to protect that solid state equipment. They generally they're going to trigger somewhere between 150 and 300 volts of power. So a lot less than the carbon block and a lot less than the gas tubes. And listen to this, they trigger 3 to 5 nanoseconds. So they trigger extremely quickly. So, but they're also the most expensive. So that's why you don't see them too often. So again, they're usually colored by the red. Usually if you see one in a building entrance protection, that should tell you as an installer, there's a very expensive piece of equipment on the other side of that cable that they're trying to protect. Building entrance protection is expensive anyway. When you put one in, because I estimated lots of jobs with them, and I've also installed lots of them, you're going to spend anywhere between $250 and $500 per pair to install them. So if you're putting in 100 pair cable, you have to put in 200 protectors because you have to protect both ends of the cable because we don't know which way that voltage is going to go. So you got to protect both sides of that. So it's very, very expensive. So I had customers try to talk me out. So we did have a question come in, and it's from Tyler. Let's see if I can do this. Boom. There we go. Look at that. Chuck learned a new trick. It says, do you have any tips on terminating hybrid fiber power cables? I'm thinking termination the power cables in particular. I have never had the opportunity to do that. But you know what I will do? I know a lot of experts. I will reach out to some of my friends and I will do a follow-up episode. I better write this down. I'll do a follow-up episode on the podcast, terminating hybrid HAYBRID fiber power cables. Now, was there a particular issue that you were having, or you just wanted general information in general, right? So, any tips for doing 10 gig bit error testing that is not $10,000? I haven't priced testers recently, but I will tell you this: SoftThing has the best. They have the best bit error rate tester, and it is I think one of the most cost efficient. And if you need to get hooked up with that, let me know, and I'll put you in touch with them because I know a couple of people over there. I mean, I know them through the channel and stuff. I've never met them in person, but okay. So let's go to the next question that was submitted ahead of time. We figure I'd turn off this one so it's turned off. Again, remember, put your questions in the chat box. So this one's from Joe P in Atlanta, and he shot me an email. Again, chuck@letstalkcabling.com. Send me your questions and you'll be put on a future podcast. I'll make you internet famous. I'll put you out there. So John asked me, what's the difference between RJ45 and AP8C? You know what that tells me? That tells me that John is probably a relatively new installer in this industry, because RJ45 is a term that us old guys use, right? RJ45 was a term, if I remember it, I think it was created by the FCC, and it stands for Registered Jack Pattern 45, I think. Because there was more than one. There's RJ21s, RJ25s. There's all kinds of different kinds of RJs. So RJ45 basically means that you have 8 conductors, and those 8 conductors show up on the actual jack. Now, there's more than one. But that's why it's called AP8C, A position. I'm shaking my camera. AP8C. Mark, do me a favor. Shoot me a message on LinkedIn so that way I have your contact information, and I'll definitely have them get in touch with you. Okay. There's also other ones. There's a 4P4C and a 6P6C. For example, a 4P4C. Now, this is going to be a stretch probably for some people. For those of us who have landlines in our house, a landline is a telephone that's actually connected to a cable, right? In the past, we used to call them telephones, but now we call them landlines because everybody has cell phones nowadays, right? Nobody has a landline, or very few people have landlines anymore. So when you look at that telephone, there's a cord that goes from the handset to the actual phone. Now, if you actually look at the connectors on that, it looks just like an RJ45, but smaller. And it's only got 4 positions inside of it and 4 conductors, 4P4C. You cannot plug a 4P4C into a 6P6C or an AP8C. It's not going to work very well for you when you do that, right? So then there's also a 6P6C. That means 6 positions, 6 contacts. 6P6C, there's obviously 6 positions, 6 contacts. That's the cable that plugs in the phone into the outlet on the wall for your older phone systems. Some of your, let me back up. I can't even really say that. The AT&T Merlin phone system. It's been around for, I was installing them in the 80s, and they were considered somewhat halfway old then. So they're really old. So a AT&T Merlin phone system used an AP8C. But the majority of the time, if you have like a Panasonic KSU or Roam or one of those other phones, they were typically 6P6C. Very good, Mark. You get the prize award because he said POTS, and he wasn't talking about the plant. He's talking about plain old telephone service. Plain old telephone service. That's what. Have you ever noticed that we don't have Category 1 and Category 2 in our industry? Have you ever thought about why is that? That's because what happened was, for those who may not know the history, we started off with, Anixter came up with a way to classify the cabling so people can pick the right kind of cable for the type of landing. They came up with what was called their levels program. So the first ones were level 1 and level 2 and level 3, right? It became so popular that, and I heard that ANSI bought it, but I can't say that for a fact, but they ended up putting it in the stand. They got rid of level 1 and 2, because nobody uses it. That's, but for example, Category 3 will do up to 16 megahertz. Right? Category 5E goes up to 100 megahertz. Right? So that's what plain old telephone service. So you get extra recognition. I know. How'd I know Mark was an RCDD? How'd I know? Because us RCDDs are smart. Doesn't mean we know everything, but we know a lot. So by the way, for those who can't count, we started a TDMM study group this week, and we're working our way through it. We should be done in about 6 months. I'm really excited to learning all the new stuff in the 14th edition of the TDMM, because I passed my RCD exam on the 8th edition. Hey, and if you're an RCDD, in the chat box, tell me what edition TDMM you studied and passed your test on. And then also put in what edition, comma, and then put the number of times it took you to pass that test. So for me, I would put 8 because I did it on the 8th edition, comma, 2, because it took me 2 times to pass that test. That test, it's funny. I've told my wife on more than one occasion that if I should happen to, fall off my motorcycle, if I happen to roll over my tractor and I'm in the hospital, I'm a zombie, I'm a vegetable, she has to keep paying my Bixie dues until 1 year after she puts me in the ground. because if I come back, I don't want to have to take that test over again. That was a rough test. Mark, you have my respect. Mark says he did it on the 13th edition on his first try. First try. Very good. Not many people do it on the first try. It's a tough exam. Really tough. I was actually looking at the Bixby site today. I was trying to look up one of our classes for the company that I work for, because we had an issue. They couldn't figure out why it is certified for continuing education credits or not. And so I was actually looking at the Bixby flashcards. The Bixby flashcards that you can purchase for studying, $275. $275. Yeah. For my study group, I'm actually creating quizzes, and I'll probably end up having the same amount of questions, and that's free. And you get scored right away, and you can take it anytime you want. Yep. So then again, put your questions in the chat box. Oh yeah, there is 2,100 and some odd pages in the 14th edition in the code book. And they've made changes, Mark, from the 13th to the 14th. They put in a couple new sections, and they added some stuff to some chapters. And that's why I said when I looked at that, I was like, man, I need to get up to date. I'm kind of behind. Again, put your questions in the chat box. Okay, then the last previously submitted question I have is from Nick T. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the city of brotherly love. He asks, Chuck, why is there no Cat 7? Yeah, it's kind of funny. I just start kind of going down that path there, right? So in the U.S., we have Cat 3, which is sold. It's not recommended to be installed per the standards. Cat 5e, Cat 6, Cat 6a, and Cat 8, all ratified. When you're putting in cable in a new job site, they actually recommend you put in 5e for the voice, 5e or above for the data. I was actually reading a proposed change to the building automation standard. They're working on it right now. And I'm not on that committee, but a friend of mine is, and he happened to shoot me over a screen snapshot of something. And they're trying to make, for the building automation, Cat 6a the minimally compliant cable for building automation. Cat 6a. Now I understand that's for for the cameras, because if you have high bandwidth, high power. I understand that, but there's a lot of other building automation devices that don't need a Cat 6a cable. So, but the response I got back was the reason they want that is because they don't want to spec out a different type of cable for every different type of device that's out there. So that's why. So anyways, so Mark says he's doing his CompTIA Network Plus right now. Not looking forward to doing the TDM again ever. Hey, I'm with you. We actually have another person in this room too as well. His name is George. George also just passed I believe a CompTIA test as well. I can't remember. George, if you happen to still be on, put it in the chat box. Let me know. I can't remember which certification that you got, but used to use it for his POA for lighting systems. Oh, very cool. Power over Ethernet. You need to keep an eye on that for several reasons. One, it's exciting technology. It's going to be something additional that we get to do, more cable we get to install. More importantly, you need to be watching it, because at some point, electricians, journeyman electricians, electric companies, they're going to come after us. They're going to say, why are you guys doing our work? We can do up to 100 watts of power across a 4-pair cable. 100 watts of power. For those who don't know how much energy that is, you can't see my setup here. I got my computer here. I got a monitor here and a monitor behind me, and I use all three, right? So the monitor behind me, it's 55 inches, 60 inches, something like that. I can literally power it up with a 4-pair cable. Electrically, yeah, exactly. So that's a lot of energy. So George said he had his A+ certification. So I have extra admire for those people who have those CompTIA certifications, because they're just as hard as ours. So getting back to Nick's question, why is there no Cat 7? Well, technically, there is Cat 7, but not ratified in the ANSI documents. Right now, there's a movement right now to kind of bypass Cat 7 and go straight to Cat 8. And they've already ratified Cat 8 in the U.S. Outside of the U.S., if you look at the ISO standard, they've ratified Cat 7 and Cat 7A. That's my watch going off. I'm sorry about that, guys. They've ratified Cat 7 and Cat 7A. So for those of me that know, Cat 7 does up to 600 megahertz. Cat 7A, gotta look at my notes, 1,000. So the first Cat 7, the reason we have two of them, the first Cat 7, it had what was called a terabyte connector. It had a proprietary connector. Now, when they write the standards, one of the things that they do when they write the standards is they want to make sure that that jack is backwards compatible. So you can plug, even though this might be a Cat 6 jack, you can plug a Cat 5e patch cord into this. Now, that doesn't make this perform to the Cat 6. It's only going to perform to its lowest level, but it should be backwards compatible. So that first Cat 7 cable plant that they came out with, they couldn't find a way to get all those conductors together at that frequency and not have near and crosstalk issues. It looked a lot like Type 1 cable from back in the 80s. So they came up with a special type of connector. It's called a terabyte connector. And then they certified as Cat 7. And then some smart engineer figured out how to do Cat 7A with an RJ45 or an APHC, and that's Cat 7A. That's why there's two of them. That's why it was Cat 7, Cat 7A. But they're in the ISO standards, the 11801 standards. They're not in the ANSI standards. There's a movement right now by the industry to take the ANSI standards and the ISO standards and make them one. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, but So anyways, like I was saying, there's different rating category cables. I did a couple part series on that, on transmission fundamentals, talked about what is the sinusoidal wave, what is a megahertz, and literally explained how we get to those. But think of it this way. So Cat 5 is 500 megahertz, right? And Cat 8 is 2,000. A Cat 8 highway has 2,000 lanes on it. So those 2,000 lanes can support a lot more cars, right? The Cat 5e highway only has 500 lanes. That's one of the easiest way to really kind of think about that. So we're right at that 30-minute mark. Anybody have any questions? Now, there's a 30-second delay, so I'll wait 30 seconds to see if anybody types in any questions. And, take another sip of my drink. I want to thank everybody who did subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helped us to get to that 100 mark. We are there. If you think you know somebody who might be interested in our content, somebody who likes to learn, likes to know things, please send them to our podcast, send them to our YouTube channel. Those content will always be free. Always be free. But if you do like the content and you want to support the learning platform, it's not required, but if you want to, because it costs money to StreamYard has a monthly fee, Zoom has a monthly fee. The web server for the podcast, the web server for the page, it all costs money. So you can actually go to the letstalkcabling.com website, go to the support page. There's a couple different ways. One, you can actually go and become a Patreon member. There's 4 different levels. That it's all self-explanatory. You can do a one-time donation through PayPal. There's even a way that you can click on the Amazon links. It'll take you to my page, and it'll show products that I recommend. For example, if you click on the books, it's going to take you to a separate page, and it'll say, these books I recommend that you have. Obviously, the very first one, the code book. And then there's another one, a book called Surprise. I'm actually working through it right now. Actually, just interviewed this author Monday night, Tuesday night. Yeah, I just published that interview today. Really great interview. You probably think, what does Surprise have to do with business, right? So make sure that you go check that out. And then there's the way you support the channels. So now, nobody typed in any questions. Mark, have a good night, buddy. Take care. So nobody typed in any additional questions, so I'm going to assume that we are good to go. We will see everybody next Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, everybody, be safe.